Welcome back to Through the Bulk. I'm your host, Jason.
I'm Bobby.
And today we're going to get into some of the happenings that we're seeing surrounding the Iran issue. So we're at day 5 of a conflict that seemingly sprung up from nowhere with Iran, and our cohort in the war is Israel. And it's been abrupt, it's been unusual, not completely unexpected, not too far from left field, but nonetheless striking. And there's been some casualties on our side. There's been a litany on the other sides. So interesting enough of a topic and current enough that I thought we would dig right into that today. So welcome back to the show, and we're going to get right into it.
I guess the big question, that is probably on a lot of people's minds is what's going on, and that is part of what we want to address, and maybe even try to, if not make sense of some of it, at least commiserate with people in the fact that, like, the information is all over the place. And I think we need to address, or at least I know I feel like I need to address some of the questions about how people who voted for this president feel about his actions, and how this has led up to this. So, I mean, I think getting right into that, this isn't what I voted for,
I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that a lot.
And I think people, I saw something the other day, and I was telling you about it before we started recording, but I think people need to hear that those of us who voted for, there are some of us that voted for, I should say, there are some of us that voted for Trump that are disenchanted because of this and other situations. And I think the enchantment started for me last summer. If I can remember, kind of a time where I was like, hold on, wait. And I know this is kind of getting away from the Iran topic, but when we were being told that the Epstein situation was a hoax, and there was nothing there, and I remember that, specifically being the topic of conversation, and it's caused volatility between me and members of my family, because the idea is that was who I voted for, and that's what I voted for. And I was like, wait, no. What I voted for was the draining of the swamp and transparency. And he ran on a platform of not being another one of the snakes in the grass. And lo and behold, it didn't even take a full year for that mask to come off. And now here we are, not even a year later from that, and we're in this big conflict when he said specifically, no new wars. And I think you said earlier, he was basically making it seem like his predecessors couldn't get through, a short period of time without starting a new war, and he wouldn't be that guy. And now we've got Venezuela, now we've got Iran, and now, almost Greenland. And so it's like,
yeah.
So I guess I just want to be clear, as we go into this, I'm disenchanted. I really had hoped for better. And to those that aren't hearing it when it comes up as a discussion point, this isn't what I voted for, and it's sad that it's turned into this big division. But Iran, what happened? I think you got a list of potentials.
I do. I've got a few points to connect with there. I don't know if disenchanted is the right word for me. I was not ever a Trump supporter, and I've never been more of a dissenter than I am now. Certainly didn't vote for him. But what's been striking to me, along with the casualties and the general perils of war, which is disgusting, which is why, yeah, a campaign promise that would have been given during the last campaign that he would not enter into these wars. Absolutely. I mean, that's one thing that I did not disagree with when looking at Trump's alleged policies or preferences, opinions. But to see, as somebody who's been an active dissenter of Donald Trump since he took office the first time, I'll say that it's been really refreshing, and I hate to say that, and there's probably a better word to use, to see so many prominent figures within the MAGA faction having an opinion that looks a lot more like mine about Trump over these past few weeks, and certainly over the past 5 days. So that's one point that I want to get to as well, is you've become disenchanted. It's nice to see people with very large platforms that have been unfortunately pro-Trump for so long, and one of those avid defenders that is strange to me, the cognitive dissonance that went into some of those talking heads to rationalize why they still support Donald Trump by basically reframing reality. It's the only way that a lot of them were able to achieve it. But to see them coming out of that and coming into almost up to gather air after being submerged, and for them to start saying things that I agree with once again, which is nice. But to the other points, yeah, what is going on in Iran? And so when the administration is addressing that glaring and obvious and self-evidently important question of why are we doing this, it's been very unusual to see the administration give so many different explanations or rationalizations or the causality of through their answers to that question. I mean, in a single day, and certainly over the past 5, we've heard that it's to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, which has been a point of contention for quite a while. And I've got quite a few opinions from my observations over the past year or so about that. There's also stopping Iran's ballistic missile program, which, okay, that makes sense from certain military mindsets, I'm sure. But then it goes to preempting an imminent Iranian attack. And I've heard that both ways, that that Iran was going to attack Israel, and we had intelligence of that. And so, of course, there has to be a defense there. But I've also heard another proposition within that same, theme, that quite the contrary. Israel was absolutely, unequivocally going to attack Iran, and much like when you your buddy gets in a bar fight, now all of a sudden you've got to participate. You can't just let your best friend get his ass kicked by these 2 guys. So now, just by proxy, you're brought into the war. And that's kind of another side to that particular coin. But then there was, protecting the U.S. troops from retaliation. And that was given, I think, in the same day as punishing Iran for human rights abuses. And then it was stopping Iran's support for militants. And then we heard promoting regime change, which was another thing that, Tulsi Gabbard, who's our intelligence czar, I was a big supporter of her during her presidential campaigning, because she was so anti-regime change wars. So it was really, really striking for me to hear that one being proposed. And then the diplomatic negotiations failed, which Trump has taken so much credit for in ending so many wars. It's unfortunate. I'm sure a tough one for him to even mention that one. And of course, the baseline, which I think we all can agree, if we trace this back enough, it's the religious and the ideological framing, the more controversial type of conversation about why those 2 factions are warring and why we're compelled to join. So I think the bigger concern for the context of this episode, war is awful, and I hate it. And unfortunately, as a 45-year-old man, I've seen a lot of war and a lot of Americans die throughout the process. But I don't have enough insight yet. I don't think any of us have any accurate information to really discuss the boots on the ground aspects of the war. What I'm more concerned about for the framing of this episode is, what do we do when the administration that's already been accused of so much dishonesty and so much misinformation and gaslighting, what do we do now when we're involved in a war where Americans are already dying, and we're being told in a single day, over the course of a 5-day war, all of these these 9 different reasons as to why we're going to war. And I want to be clear when I say it's not as though it's these 9 different things are reasons. They've all been interchanged with being the reason. So the way that the Trump administration is speaking about this conflict is so decoherent and conflicting, not only depending on which person representing the administration is giving the answer, but the same person can give the answer more than once in different ways throughout the course of a single day. So what we've got here is different than having these 9 different things be the reason for the conflict. They're being sold to us as individually and decoherently the reason why we're in this conflict. And that is, from my observations and my research and my lived experience, a very novel and new problem for us to be faced with coming from a presidential administration in America.
Well, what you've just mentioned is what I was talking about earlier before we got on air. It was, I called it information whack-a-mole. It feels like
It's very apt, a very fitting description of this phenomenon.
well, and it's not isolated to this event. This is just the latest um variation of
And certainly the most magnanimous. It's got the most gravity. There's already people dying by the droves.
well, and how did we go? I mean, to be frank, like how did we go from we just won't support somebody like Ukraine against Russia, who is trying to take over Ukraine, to how do we go from that to supporting Israel going and attacking Iran? And of course, in the middle of all that, you've got Palestine, and it's just there's so much like it's like they don't want us to be able to focus on one issue or even the moment you see that issue and you're like, hey, we need to address this, like it, they're like, hey, here's another one, and that's why I call it whack-a-mole, because you're
Yeah. Yeah.
hey, you said no new wars. Hey, but look over here, Epstein. Well, we
Yeah.
said we were going to release those, and and that needs to be, everybody on that list needs to be subpoenaed, and we need to take this, to a court of law and actually address it. Yeah, but Palestine. Well, well, hold on. We still talking about Epstein.
Oh yeah. Well, we're in war now, so
Yeah.
now we
Yeah,
can
now-
only look at this.
And now we need to look at the war.
Well, and this is where my hypothesis comes in, and it's probably going to be called slightly crazy, if not outright crazy. But so was the notion of our, capital being stormed by dissenters who were trying to stop the changing of power. So what was crazy at one time has been proven to be reality later on. So maybe this won't be such a hot take here as the weeks and months unfold. But I think it's all tied together. All the things you just mentioned. I think that Israel's connection to the Epstein files and the leverage that grants them over very powerful people that run our country. And keep in mind, we're the leaders of the free world. And this war with Iran are all tied together. That's my grand hypothesis. I won't say theory because I don't want to tarnish the term any more than it already has been by these conspiracy theorists. But I think it's all one big clusterfuck. And it's been in the works for decades. And that's what money does. When we talk about the Illuminati, I don't think that exists. But the idea of it, what it represents, is in fact how the world works. That is what the hegemony of the global community is. It's exactly what we boogeyman through terms like the Illuminati.
Well, and for anybody under, let's just say 30, 25 that be tuning in high school, for me, it was right around, and we touched on this a little bit last week, but or at least in the last couple weeks, we had the Twin Towers, the
9/11.
yeah, 9/11. And right around that time, what was Bush Jr., going after, but weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's not like this is new, but this is the newest iteration of that same thing where it's like, hey, there's crazy things going on in our country. Look over here. And it's like,
Yeah. It's
um,
it was the American way, and now it is the global way. I shouldn't say that. I think every leader of every nation that's ever existed has participated in this Illuminati behavior since it's been around.
one, and I was telling you about an interview that I listened to yesterday on this very subject. And when Reagan was in power, you had, the same things going on with war in the Middle East and us, finding a reason to get involved. And it's like addressing a very, very simple statement or ideology that Trump was supposed to have represented
Mhm.
was America first, and I'll say to some extent that looked to me when I was envisioning it as getting ourselves removed from these situations, focusing on our own economy, focusing on our own society. I mean, we've got so much drama happening here at home. We need to deal with that. And I mean,
It's supreme chaos,
yeah.
and the person that committed to being the antithesis to the chaos has been the catalyst. He is at the source of every bit of the chaos that America is going through, and that is literal insanity.
Well, and without having like more in-depth information, at the risk of, you know, here in Iowa, we've had some things going on in the schools and some careers that were upended because of similar things that were going on in the Epstein files, and that's just people messing with kids when they shouldn't be messing with kids, like it's that simple, like when kids are involved, it needs to be acted on fast. And it has been here, the case where now we're seeing all this come to light in our own school districts and stuff, and people are losing their jobs.
Yeah,
And
and then here we have, the party that was at the base and comprised almost exclusively of this QAnon movement that Donald Trump was allegedly the clandestine mastermind behind in his war against pedophilia is mentioned in the Epstein files more than any other person.
well, the question there, I think maybe I did. I don't know if I sent it to you. I saw something that said that he's mentioned in the Epstein files more than Harry Potter was mentioned in the Harry Potter series.
It's absurd, it's undeniable, but there are still so many people on the MAGA side that are denying it. And it's so weird. These were the people that believed there was a global conspiracy of child pedophilia amongst the Illuminati that has, for the most part, just become a truth.
Well,
And Donald Trump is one of the major conspirators, and these people still support him.
well, yeah, and
What the fuck, man?
I not too long ago, I would have been considered a conspiracy theorist. One of my friends, his name is Justin. He lives in Texas, but he kind of turned me on to the whole underground news, and info wars and things.
Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Water's turning the freaking front gate.
Hey, well, Alex Jones is not without his issues for sure.
He is an issue.
How
Anthropomorphized issue.
he also has raised awareness on things like this. I remember specifically, I mean, this would have been 2000, maybe 16, my buddy going, like talking about this stuff on the horizon. And then fast forward to 2020, and he was saying Epstein didn't kill himself. And I was just like, who's Epstein and why does that, what are we talking about? And sure enough, here we are in 2026. So, I mean, we've known about this stuff for over, you know, almost a decade.
Yeah.
And now we've got a list of people on it. And I think, in relevance to what we started the episode on with Iran, I feel like this is a look over here moment, like the magician's sleight of hand, like showing us, one part of the trick while the other part of the trick is
Yeah, it feels more like to me an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. One of the episodes where Q is on board and he just alters reality, and all of a sudden now they're in like the medieval times, steeds and things, and it's like he just hijacks reality and makes it into whatever he wants. That's what it feels like happened. Some interdimensional cosmic entity has basically captivated us and turned us into a different movie.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Addressing, I guess, the you had mentioned the religious ideology and everything involved there, and then we kind of talked about this a little bit.
When I'm going to go down, I'm going to give just in a blurty, ranty, Gen X, shaking my fist, saying "get off my lawn" kind of way. I'm going to go down each of the 9 points and just puke my opinion into the ether.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, as a conservative Christian who gave my backing to Trump for the sole reason of basically not giving it to the other side and not supporting other evils that I was not okay with. I'm not okay with this. I'm not okay with, the insinuation that because there's biblical precedent to support Israel, we have to then, be their spotter when they lift weight that's too big for them. Like that's not okay. Like when if the narrative is that we jumped in because we knew they were going to do something stupid and we doubled down on that same stupid thing, we were like, let's do it too. I don't agree with it. And I don't think that most Christians will either, and we're really looking at it and I guess I just wanted to address that. Like, if you're calling yourself a Christian and you're saying that we need to be attacking other countries for the sake of peace, that just doesn't make sense to me. Like
too much dissonance there to rationalize.
There's defense, and then there's, you're the attacker, you're the aggressor,
you're the bad guy.
I can't in a world, I can't see Iran being the one that was going to go, yeah, let's just start a war with the whole globe, because they're right in the middle of a lot of firepower that they can't match. They
can because of us.
Well, I'm saying like they're right in between three superpowers that are way heavier than them in the grand scheme of things, and I can't see them going, you know what? Well, let's just go to war. Let's just do it.
Let's just do it.
But yeah, that's my way in on that from at least a standpoint of Christians should back the Jews. We should pray for them. We should advocate for peace, but pulling us into another war, I don't know that I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm down with it. And what I mean is boo. I'm thumbs down to that. The whole thing. This is absurd. And as we are told these different varying reasons as to why we've decided 5 days ago to go to war. We're talking about preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons. What about the outright, outrageously successful bombing of their nuclear facilities that we did just a few months ago? It was just the most successful mission in the history of armed forces, and the tactical precision that we destroy. We just no chance. What happened to that? Now, this country has been enriching uranium. They've been agreeable up until not too far in the recent past here to inspections. They are trying to power their country with the most, in my humble opinion, the most efficient and clean type of power that you can have, nuclear energy, especially with the modern technology and the modern safety. We've learned so much over the decades about nuclear power, and that's what they're trying to do. And we absolutely cannot look at something like that as a bad thing, or a thing that a country shouldn't have the right to do. And I understand that there's the same technology goes into making nuclear weapons. So does Iran. So do we. So do the inspectors that have gone there. And until Donald Trump became the biggest asshole in history regarding that program, they were agreeable to inspections. But it's just a great reason that Americans will buy to say that's why we're going to war. Stopping their ballistic missiles program. I mean, again, coming from the nation with the largest military force and the biggest military budget, I just still find it strange that we are so empowered to dictate that other sovereign nations can't have technology it's not even approaching ours. But nonetheless, it's greater than we want them to have. So therefore, war. Preempting an imminent Iranian attack, whether we're talking about an imminent attack from Iran on Israel or vice versa. Again, for a president who said that it's America first and made a concerted commitment that he would not be that president, and accosted others who didn't have the same view, it's just another offense against what this man does in relation to what he says he's going to do. And you've got the protecting U.S. troops from retaliation. We shouldn't even be in a position in which our troops can have retaliation executed upon them. We are so involved in conflicts and regime changes, and that's a choice by conservative leadership in this country for decades. I'm not saying Barack Obama wasn't a boots on the ground kind of guy. He was more in the drone strike arena. He was definitely a warring president. So whenever I have concerns about Donald Trump, it doesn't mean that I'm pro or anti any other previous president. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't have a presence in that area that puts our boys and girls in jeopardy to begin with, let alone to a degree in which that's a reason why we would start a war with another country.
I want to touch on what you said about the successful attack from not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
That
The precision.
That's such a great example of, again, I'm gonna get people saying it. Information whack-a-mole.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it's not the first time I've heard that, but it definitely bears addressing, and it's definitely something people need to think about and ask themselves: if that attack was successful, and why is another one necessary?
Full on war
and
or bombing.
I can tell you, as somebody who has tried to watch various press conferences from Trump, and then tried to make sense of it with all the other information that I'm being told, it does not line up. It just doesn't. And anybody who sits down and just, I mean, you almost could or should write it down and then, play some bingo with yourself and see how many times it's contradicted in another press conference.
There's got to be several Washington, D.C. drinking games based on a principle similar to that.
Yeah. But the notion that we need to go over there and start a war against something that we wiped out not too long ago, it just doesn't add up. And that is unfortunately, it doesn't even have to be like ancient history for us to be told something entirely different. And I'll go back to the Epstein thing because, as you said, I believe there's connections that we obviously aren't being shown, and there's clearly reasons for them to not want to bring it all to light, like anything else. If any tax-paying American had evidence that they were involved in child pornography or um, the sex trafficking or prostitution or any of the above, it it would be adjudicated so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their reputations would be tarnished, they would be canceled. But here we have the most high profile leaders um, and it's just nothing's being done.
Yeah, it's the oligarchs of our nation.
But speaking on the recency of the information and another example of the whack-a-mole that I'm talking about, we knew that something was happening, and Trump says nothing's happening. Last summer, nothing's happening, and I use that as an attempt to bridge the gap with some of my family members and say, look, I know something's not right here.
Mhm.
And I feel like somebody's trying to pull the wool over my eyes, and I'm not letting it happen. So what do we do about it now? And here we are, not even a year later, and now we've got Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton in depositions. Are they depositions, or are they just like?
Yep.
Well, if they're depositions, then we need to have something done about it, right? Like this should be.
It's happening. It's in motion.
Yeah.
It can only be resisted for so long. When you've got Pam Bondi, who's one of the head lieutenants of the Trump cult, the MAGA cult, who's also the attorney general, running cover for this man. It makes it really hard to get through, but you're seeing it happen. I don't know if you watched the Clintons, but Hillary got really pissed off, kind of an unrelated thing with, breaking their own rules of the depositions, but it's crazy. Moving back into these proposed reasons why we're in this conflict. We're talking about punishing Iran because of their human rights violations. That I think unequivocally we can say that that's what has been happening there through the entire regime and prior ones, and it's atrocities. I don't want for a second for anyone to actually put stock into that's the reason why we're there, though. But that's only one side of my dissent on that notion. The other side is, what about the human rights violations that have been happening in our streets under the Trump administration with these deportations and their enforcement of immigration laws? Those are unequivocally, by global standards, human rights violations. Yet we're supposed to believe that that's something that we're going to go to war with Iran over. And it was propositioned as the reason. You've also got stopping Iran's support for militants, which, yes, that's also happening. There's a proxy war that's been going on there. It's a very complicated thing in the Middle East. But again, the commitment was to not become involved in that to a degree in which we were involved in the conflicts. That was a campaign promise. So militants being funded, I get it, especially when they're fighting with one of our allies. But who is fighting our ally? A organization that we built back in the day to fight our other enemies over there. Again, just ties back to an American president made a decision and an administration built up a faction. I mean, that's how wars are fought over there. And for that to be labeled as a reason why we're going to war with them now is absurd. I don't believe it is the reason, but if it was, man, that's the pot calling the kettle black. And that is not the right thing to do in order to solve the conflicts that are happening over there. You got the promoting regime change, which again was a core promise of the Trump campaign. And not to mention Tulsi Gabbard, who I was in love with politically for many years. I voted for her when she was running for president, even though she didn't make it onto the ballot. I still wrote her in. I believed in her. I own 2 Tulsi Gabbard t-shirts that are now in a closet collecting dust and shame, because that has always been her biggest thing. She always gives that same speech, as a soldier, as somebody who's seen the high price of war. Regime change wars are bad. And then we have her as our czar of intelligence supporting this and giving that as a reason as to why we're going to war with Iran, to change the fucking leadership, which we did. Dude's dead. And he was a bad motherfucker, a horrible human being. I can't think of anyone, any country in the nation outside of their own that would look at him as anything other than a villain of history. But again, that's not why you start a war. You put boots on the ground for that. I mean, we got Osama bin Laden with one team. You don't do that's just a stupid reason to say that you're going to war, and clearly isn't the reason. And then of course it has been mentioned the religious and the ideological issues. And that's obviously undoubtedly the core at its most basic fundamental level as to why this war is even a thing. It goes back to Israel and their entitlement to the land and their expansion and the means in which they do it, and the disregard for their neighbors, and acting like a bully, even though they're too small to be the bully. But when they've got America as their strongest ally, and they've got, I believe firmly, and this is me being that hypothesis guy, the Epstein files are applying the pressure and the leverage to allow something like the U.S. becoming involved in a Israel and Iran conflict. And that's my 2 cents about these stupid fucking reasons that have been spat at the American people about why we're in this war with Iran.
There's so much information out there that it's hard to process it all. I think that we've had people try, and they get canceled or they get defamation that happens. There's just like it feels like anytime somebody tries to start pulling these threads, they get well, there's all the conspiracy theories about the Clintons and their body counts, who knows if that'll ever come to light.
And I am not dismissive of anything at this point.
Right.
Even the shit that sounds outright absurd. I mean, I thought QAnon was outright absurd. I thought all of those people were absolutely insane. And then fast forward to now, and our president seems to be one of the highest contributing factors to the whole conspiracy.
I'll go out on a limb and say he took advantage of it. Because he ran on this platform of being the change, and making America great again, right? And I wanted to see some of that stuff getting unearthed, and some of that stuff, getting, cleared out of our leadership. And it's becoming so obvious that he is one of them.
Oh yeah.
That it's like it was this big bait and switch. It's a big, hold on now, you are the puppet master, or at least one of the more prominent puppets in this puppet show.
Can you imagine the movies in the future that we made about this whole thing? It'll be an ensemble cast, and it'll be an epic picture because of the absurdity of it. And the future humans will look back at us as fucking weird, pedophilial weirdos, man. Idiots.
Well, and that's the problem, is that there's such and this is what other countries are seeing. We have other countries that are acting on this, and there's prominent figures in other parts of the world that are facing the music, but we can't seem to figure out how to do it in the most powerful country in the world. What?
No.
Like where do we, and meanwhile, we use going to war to take the attention off of it. And I think in a very simple way to answer the question that we started the today's show with was, why is this happening? Well, it's happening so that people will at least be distracted from the bigger situation that's going. And I dare say, definitely bigger situation that's happening here on our own soil, and we need to address it. The situation in Iran, I think it's only going to continue to escalate, and hopefully, what I've heard about China and Russia, feeling they need to calm down, because at the risk of being further labeled a conspiracy theorist, we got China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran as a conglomeration, as a they're all
They're definitely allied. Yeah.
yeah. So now we've taken hostile actions towards Iran and their big brothers, like we are to Israel. Their big brothers are at least beholden to do something about it. There's got to be an obligation. And what I've heard is China's speaking out, going, cool it. And Russia's speaking out, going, cool it. North Korea is just like, let one of them hit us. We want to play.
Say something.
North Korea is just like, guys, we can, this is the time. Let's tag me in. That's North Korea right now. As North Korea has always been, if I understand correctly. So it needs to be de-escalated. And unfortunately, the de-escalator is going to escalate other things in our country even farther. You spoke to the civil rights stuff, and by our own constitution, there's things that are happening that they need to be addressed, and our attention needs to be on that. So why go to war with Iran? Because it's better than paying attention to the atrocities that are on our own soil.
Well, and I think that's a secondary little benefit that Trump gets from this conflict. I think that, if we were in a different situation, I honestly think Trump would not align with going to war. But I think because of the implications of that happening without us, and the peril that it puts us in from a political global perspective, I think he wouldn't have chosen to do it unless he felt compelled to. It's the reasons why he feels compelled to that I'm disgusted by. And I think it, like we've been talking about, it's all tied together. I think a healthy byproduct of this conflict, if he's going to make, lemonade out of lemons, it's that he does get to distract a little bit from the shit that's raining down on him with these Epstein files. Man, I loved every minute of watching Hillary Clinton get pissed off. I don't know if you watched the hearings or the deposition, but she was fucking furious, and I felt it for her. It was a fucking shit show. But there's shit coming out that is, to your point, it's going to have to be escalated. And eventually it will. And to my initial point of curiosity and whimsy of watching these former and very recently former MAGA talking heads, when I'm chronically on YouTube, and that's all I watch is political commentary and shit about physics. And the talking heads that were formerly supporting Trump through the most cognitively dissonant ways now are pissed. And we already knew Tucker Carlson was no longer in support of Trump, but we're seeing so many more of these people that were high profile, large platform MAGA talking heads finally saying things that I agree with about the man. That's exciting. I just hate that it's taking this long to get people that have platforms to advocate change to finally come around and see that this man is the worst possible solution to our country's woes in history.
Well, there's also the factor. I think that at least in my situation, or at least in my perspective, I should say, the trust has been broken. Some people might harass me for ever trusting him in the first place, but and it is what it is, right? But now that I'm going, what's actually going on here? Now, when I watch him speak, I'm like, how can that be true if this person's saying that? Or how can this be true when there's, evidence of the contrary over here? So I think my big message, I guess, to get across with this particular instance would be something that I've echoed before. Check the credibility of the information that you're consuming. Put it against the other information that's out there. And usually it's going to land somewhere in between, So what's really going on in Iran? Check your information.
And keep your eyes on it, because it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And I want to draw some attention to that as we close out. This is the 5th day of the war. There's been hundreds of casualties to our knowledge on Iran's side. I don't know figures of Israeli soldiers or civilians that have been killed, but there's been American lives lost, some of them from here in Iowa. And so I want to make it very clear that I personally, and I think a lot of you listening, are very anti-war. And it's because it's real and people die. And my heart goes out to everyone who's been affected with the loss of someone they love, just in general, on all sides. The world doesn't need any more people dying due to explosions and bullets and projectiles and crumbling buildings and babies being trapped. We need no more of that. And this is the United States contributing to more of that awful. And so my heart goes out to everyone that's been affected. And I know that there's a lot of heavy hearts in the States right now. And I can only imagine what's going on over there in the Middle East. A lot of people's lives have been, if not ended, changed forever. And I hate that it's happening. So my heart goes out to all of them. And I want to thank everybody who is still with us and listened to this mostly ranty dissent against something that just does not seem to make sense to the majority of us, and that is clearly causing just more devastation in the world. But thank you for joining, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, I'm Jason.
And I'm Bobby, and by all means, rant with us in the comments, share your opinions. We want to know, how do you feel about this? What do you think? If you've got new information to share, let us know. But I'm Bobby, and
I'm Jason, and if you're a religious person out there, maybe some prayers in the direction of this conflict. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.